So you claim you're a Knicks fan, right? I'm about to show you why New York fell in love with the New York Knicks. We got some untold stories, maybe some shit you know, maybe some shit you don't from the 90s, but this is what shaped New York, and this is what shaped the love for the New York Knicks. Let's get into it. Go. 1991, New York City. In the early 90s, the whole city was trying to move on from a decade defined by crime. But with murders climbing to an all-time high of over 2,600 in 1990, things were headed in the wrong direction. The same could be said of the Knicks, who'd been a disappointment throughout the 80s and had just gotten bounced in the first round of the playoffs in Stu Jackson's second year as head coach. But while the city was still 4 years from turning things around under a new mayor who would become notorious for his tough stance on crime, Knicks fans wouldn't have to wait so long, and toughness would be the key to their turnaround as well.
You know, the Knicks have always been this very proud franchise, but in the early 80s, you know, it was a league in distress. It was a team in distress because you had a lot of drug abuse, a lot of alcohol abuse. And some of these stories about Knicks players were that they get calls and they'd be like, yo, your teammates down here copping on the corner. And it got so bad that in 1982, that there was actually an FBI investigation into the Knicks for point shaving for some local drug dealers. They actually spent 4 years on this investigation from 82 to 86. And in 86, it ended up no arrests were made. There were 3 players on the Knicks, but they were never named. So no one knows actually who it is. But this was definitely the low spot for this franchise, which had gone from playing a very beautiful brand of basketball in the 70s with, you know, Willis Reed, Clyde Frazier, Bill Bradley, Phil Jackson, and won the championship in 70 and 73 to the early 80s just being a debacle. But it actually was quite a parallel to the city.
Oh, I remember that. And that's what it was, like the early 80s. That's when crack hit New York. They were in New York. They're the Knicks. Drugs was everywhere. You saw what happened to Len Bias. And there's a bunch of other stories about a whole bunch of Knicks. There was one from the Bronx. I think his son is a New York One reporter. I can't think of his name right now. He was a player on the Knicks. They caught him and he was doing crack and stuff like that. And he lived in the projects in New York while he was a Knick.
Crack hit in that mid 80s, 1985, and that was when the Knicks actually got Patrick Ewing, right? And that was the first year of the lottery. And, you know, there's this whole controversy that David Stern, because he was from New York, even though a lot of people thought he hated the Knicks, he was from New York. Did he rig this whole thing for the Knicks? Because there's controversy. He bent the edge of the envelope. He pulled it out in a certain way, so he knew it was the Knicks were going to get the first pick and get Ewing. And Ewing comes in as this savior. Patino comes in, you know, from Providence and leads them to a very good record in a couple of years. Then he just murks for Kentucky, right? And Stu Jackson takes over, and they go from still pretty good to losing in the first round, getting swept.
It was in the New York Post and the Daily News. I used to go get the newspaper for my father, so that was the back page. The Gerald Wilkins, Kiki Vandeweghe, that whole team. I remember
Trent Tucker.
Trent Tucker, my man with the dunks, what's his name? Kenny Skywalker.
Oh.
You know, he ended up not being all that, but he was exciting. He won the dunk contest, shit like that. But that was the beginning of the Knicks for me. I would say the Rick Pitino, Stu Jackson years was when I really got into basketball.
At night in the summers, listening to Phil Rizzuto, the Scooter on, you know, what was it, 660 or whatever, listening to Yankees games. And then it was MSG watching the Knicks games. And that team didn't really have that toughness. It had a little grit. And then things changed.
The Knicks turnaround from in the 80s to legendary in the 90s was due to one move. When Dave Checketts became the Knicks GM, he set his sights on signing Pat Riley to be the team's head coach, but it would come at a steep price. Riley was working for NBC and wanted to not only be the highest paid coach in the league, but he wanted the Knicks to buy him a home in the New York City area. That's not cheap. Riley also wanted a book deal, a potential movie deal since the club was owned by Paramount at the time, and he demanded that the team issued polo shorts actually be made by Ralph Lauren, not that generic bullshit everyone else had on. On top of that, he wanted his laundry and dry cleaning expenses covered. That was going to be expensive. But his biggest request, he said he only would join the Knicks if Pat Ewing agreed to stay with the team. Though the Knicks declined to foot the laundry bill, they did get their man. And Ewing, too. That was big, bro. Ewing was the centerpiece. Knicks fans already loved Ewing before Riley got here. Riley knew that was the main piece to build around. It's Pat Riley, bro. He's smart. That was the years hip-hop was popping. Mama Said Knock You Out was around that time. And Scenario. And, yo, New York was just, it was popping,
Let
bro.
the rhythm hit him.
Did Eric B. and Rakim. I mean, yo, New York was just popping. It was a different kind of time. People were in the parks all day. We were in the park from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You go to the park. You didn't even eat, bro. You just the water fountain. That was it. I probably burned 3,000 calories a day. I had abs.
That was around the time the strength training shoes came out.
Yes. I didn't have them, but somebody would bring them to the park. And everybody put them on. But I tell you what, my man used them. And he used them consistently for like 3 months, loading up for the summer. He was coming for the summer. And the court that we played on, one side was 10 feet, the other side was like, I don't know, maybe 9.5, 9.25. It was shorter. So you knew if it was your turn and you had that side of the court, you could try to throw something down. And yo, he came. My man never dunked before. 3 months of that jumping shoe, whatever that shit was, that wedge, he was dunking on that 9.5, bro, 9.25. Pause.
The crazy thing about this whole thing with Riley wanting Ewing to stay there is, so David Falk, who's like the agent of all agents, especially back then, had Michael Jordan, had Patrick Ewing. So he had put a clause into Ewing's rookie contract that said if Ewing fell outside the top 4 on the highest paid players in the league, he automatically would become a free agent. And at this time, Ewing was so frustrated with the Knicks, he wanted out of there. And this was before Riley had said he was coming. Basically, what Falk did is he tried to get the Warriors to change Chris Mullin's contract. He was like the 5th or 6th highest paid player, to bring the back end of his contract to the front, because it would have pushed Ewing down out to like number 5. And the Knicks got wind of it. They were like, yo, don't play these games. So they kept Ewing from being a free agent. But then there was this whole thing where Riley was like, I'm only signing if you guys get Ewing to stay. And they were like, well, Ewing's only going to stay, we know, if we bring on a big name like Riley. So Checket's actually set up both guys in 2 separate hotels in New York, and he was going between them trying to figure out like who's going to fold first, who can I use as leverage for the other one. And he ended up eventually, without knowing what Ewing was going to do, going to Riley and just saying, hey, I need to know now. I got a press conference called, and we don't know what Ewing's going to do. And that's when Riley basically was like, yo, I was just testing you to see if you were going to put up with my shit. So Riley said he was in. Then they go to Ewing, and Ewing still tried to become a free agent. And it ended up going to like arbitration or something like that. And Riley went to Ewing and was like, imagine being the dude that brings a ticker tape parade down Broadway, and it's on your shoulders. And Ewing was like, yeah, I'm in, I'll stay.
They had good intentions. It never happened, though. Shout out to Dave Checkets, because he came to New York Knicks basketball camp. I remember him coming. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he did. I was introduced to him. I was a kid. I was waiting for John Starks to come. But Dave Checkets came there, Greg Anthony, Kenny the Jet Smith. Yeah, bro. I was going to pull out receipts. I should have pulled them out. I got the plaques. I got the awards. New York Knicks basketball camp. Well, some of you Knicks fans, you wasn't there. New York Knicks basketball camp.
Pat Riley, the interesting thing is obviously he was the Lakers coach. It was showtime. It was glitz and glamour. It was fast-paced run and gun. He takes over the Knicks, and I think he looked at – this was what made me convinced he was a great coach. Yes. He looked at the personnel he had and said, we ain't doing no run and gun, running up and down the court type of stuff. So he changed the whole dynamic and the culture, and that kind of leads us into this next one we got.
Did the 90s Knicks owe their toughness to the show Soul Train? Pat Riley was a big fan of Motown and the show Soul Train. When he became head coach in 1991, he instituted a drill inspired by the Soul Train line, where participants on the show would line up while people danced between them toward the camera. Only Riley's drill was called Suicide Alley and wasn't designed to show off fancy footwork, but to toughen up the team. In the drill, 6 players would line up on each side of the lane while another was told to run through at full speed. The players on each side of the lane were instructed to throw elbows and shoulders at the runner, and more than one Knicks player was said to have bailed out moments before entering Suicide Alley. With guys like Xavier McDaniel, Patrick Ewing, Anthony Mason, and Charles Oakley participating in the drill, it's a wonder nobody got their head knocked off. Those are like linebackers. That just shows how Pat Riley's a great coach, bro. It was more of a football team he had as opposed to Showtime's Lakers. He was in the East. He had to make an East team. The town reflected
the
Knicks. Juice was in the movie theater.
Yep.
And like the music was just popping. Don't Sweat the Technique. And all of that played into what the Knicks were becoming, the team it was becoming, the swag it had. You felt it. That's what New York was falling in love with the Knicks. It was all part of it.
It was a team that was a reflection of the area. And I think that just made that bond between the fans, the audience, and the team that much stronger.
People don't understand how physical that East was. Like, remember, they were beating the shit out of Jordan. Jordan had to put on like 15, 20 pounds of muscle to come back. The Pistons, the Pacers, the teams were physical. The big man was a big man, and he had a job. Just be the big man. If somebody wants to come in, don't let them. Be physical. That's the way basketball was played, and you weren't going to get nowhere unless you had your own squad of goons.
It was about how you beat Jordan, and the only team that had really beat Jordan and owned him at that point was the Pistons. And they took a page from that Pistons book, but they brought bigger, tougher, meaner guys along with it. And they basically put the nail in the bad boys' coffin because, in 92, they beat the Pistons. This was like the end of the bad boy era officially. In the 92 playoffs under Riley, they took the Bulls, who were the number 1 seed, to 7 games. The series was crazy, and they put the Bulls on notice, like, hey, you're going to have to deal with us over the next couple of years. It was a back-and-forth series until like Game 7, where Jordan was like, dropped 42, and they beat the Knicks by 30.
What was it, Saturday, 3:30, NBA on NBC?
Yeah, on NBC.
It was Knicks Bulls, bro. Those were the best games you would have ever watched on TV of any game. Balls to the wall, all 4 quarters.
It was Riley's second season. He came back, and actually an ad agency came in that was doing the marketing for the Knicks. They took a bird's eye view shot of the Garden floor, right? And in the paint, and this, especially when you consider 91, 92, what the murder rate was in New York City. Bro, 92, Chicago, New York is 5-6 times what it is today. And they put in the key a white chalk outline like of a body. All it said underneath was tough town, tough team, the New York Knicks. And Riley was like, you guys aren't really going to run this, are you? And they were like, no, this is just to get us thinking creatively. But, I wish they ran that ad. That would have been bananas. That would be a poster on every Knicks fan wall to this day. They did another one where it was under the hoop, and it was just a Mack truck coming at you, and it was like, this is what it's like to play against the Knicks. Tough town, tough team.
The chalk outline, whoever has that right now, release it.
So let's take a look at some of these guys that were there when Riley first took over.
The Knicks of the 90s were the pro basketball equivalent of the Bad News Bears. Outside of Patrick Ewing, the 90s Knicks were always less than impressive on paper. Xavier McDaniel was a hot and cold player known for dropping 30 one night and 4 in the next. John Starks was another streaky player who made his way onto the team after bagging groceries and jumping between JUCOs. Greg Anthony may have played on one of the best college teams ever, but he was known to be a terrible shooter. And of course, you had Charles Oakley and Anthony Mason, both small school stars that were so well known for their toughness and flagrant fouls that their skill sets and footwork were often overlooked. But this franchise of cast-offs would establish the Knicks as the second best Eastern Conference team of the decade and give New Yorkers hope each year, even if they didn't ever get the ring New York deserved.
That was the Go Knicks Go video.
Remember they had the white towels? I didn't get tickets to those games, but I knew people that came home with those towels, bro. Those towels are dope.
And this was a theme for this 90s Knicks, was guys that were cast-offs from other teams, guys that were overlooked, guys that had, had to really earn their stripes and fight to get a spot on a roster, and just coming into this culture that was so strong with clearly defined roles and great coaching and great game plans that, and just the toughness underneath it all, that they overachieved. And they did. I mean, on paper, they were not a talented team most years, but then they'd show up and they'd play and they'd battle with everybody, the best of the best.
Yo, it wasn't nice in the paint, bro. You had David Robinson, Shaq was in there, Olajuwon was in there, Alonzo Mourning, and then you just had goons like Rick Mahorns and Dale Davis, Antonio Davis. Like, you don't understand. You couldn't just go in the paint back then. So these guys that they put together, the Oakleys, the Masons, every play was like a wrestling match. Who's boxing who out, the loose ball, diving on the floor. Like, people were playing. It was physical. They didn't call. Every time you touch somebody, they didn't call it. If somebody bumped somebody and somebody fell, the play keeps going.
Oakley and Mason history, and even at that time, so many people just labeled them as tough guys. But the reality is that both of them were extremely skilled. I mean, Oakley in high school was more of a skill finesse player until his coach told him he's not allowed to be on the team because he would avoid contact. He's not allowed to be on the team until he went and played on the football team. He came back looking for that contact. I mean, Mason was one of the first bigs built like that was actually bringing the ball up pretty consistently because he had good handles and he had great footwork. You know him for the fights and the flagrant fouls, but those guys had great offensive package. I mean, Oakley from like 12 feet, that jumper was wet.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. That was always overlooked about Oakley. Oakley knocked down shots. Anthony Mason would run the whole floor. When these other guys came to town, the Olajuwons, the David Robinsons, they had their hands full, and those were mega stars.
They put Mason on Olajuwon in that 94 finals, and he played great defense against him because he was just so strong. That actually helped, I think, Ewing because he was the centerpiece of their offense. Basically him and Starks were probably 75% of points on most nights out there. Let's get into one of these videos that gives a little profile of these guys.
John Starks had one of the most unlikely journeys to the NBA. Starks played just 1 year of high school ball and only got into 2 varsity games. He used loans to attend Rogers State College, where he made the school's practice squad before getting expelled and heading to Northern Oklahoma. He averaged 11 points per game there, but got expelled again. Starks started bagging groceries and then enrolled at Tulsa Junior College. A local coach saw Starks in an intramural game and offered him a tryout. Starks made the team, but rarely got off the bench until his wedding day. Starks' wedding was scheduled the same day that team had an away game in Kansas that was expected to be canceled, and it wasn't until his reception was underway that he got a call that the game was back on. He and his wife arrived at halftime down 25. Starks dropped 22 in the second half, earned a scholarship to Oklahoma State, and then bounced around the CBA and NBA before becoming a pivotal player for the Knicks. Talking about the long road, bro, like that. Yo, he was grinding. He kept going, and that's why everybody loves him. That's why, regardless of that terrible night that we'll get to later, forget about the dunk. I get it. I get all of that. It was night in and night out. He went hard. He was the blue collar. He fit right in. It was the blue collar Mason, Oakley, McDaniel, and Starks was right there. He wasn't as big as them. He played that way from a guard position.
You got to think about it. I mean, we talked about the front line and the centers and those guys being tough back then, but that was Michael Jordan, Reggie Miller. You had shooting guards that were, he was going up against consistently on both ends and holding his own for a guy that was bagging groceries a couple years ago. And you're just like, wait, how does this happen? He earned it and he fought for it. And once he got there, no one was going to take it away from him.
I remember they used to say it like it was a dig. Like, oh, this guy's back. He used to be bagging groceries. That shit is the biggest story of a man. He didn't give up. And then what do you know? He's dunking on Michael Jordan in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Come on, bro. That guy's, and you could tell he meant it. You could tell he loved the Knicks because he's still there today, courtside.
Now let's get into another favorite for Knicks fans, Mason.
Anthony Mason had one of the wildest journeys to the NBA. After his first 2 years at Tennessee State, Mason got motivated by the birth of his first son and stepped his game up, probably because he realized he was going to need to get a real job if he didn't go pro. He averaged 28 points per game his senior year and got drafted 53rd overall in the 1988 draft by Portland. After failing to make the Blazers, Mace played in Turkey and Venezuela with quick stops with the Nets and the Nuggets, a stop in the CBA, and another stop in the USBL before his GM told a Knicks scout to check him out. Mason dropped 36 on the night the Knicks scout was in attendance, but there was a problem. He went to dinner with reps from an Israeli team and signed a contract moments before he got a call to join the Knicks Summer League team. Luckily for Mace and the Knicks, the Israeli team let Mason walk, and the rest is history. Yeah, Mason was that dude too, bro. At that time, everybody was getting like the lines in their head and the lightning bolts and the heart.
He killed it.
He came, bro. It was like the perfect timing that he did that too. You know what I'm saying? Like just the way it was in the city and the way the team was formulating and how everybody was on the bandwagon, like, yo, it's Knicks town. And then he came and I forgot what he had. I think he was a star. When he came out with that, everybody was like, ooh, it was just New York. It was just so New York.
Every week, it was Mace one week. It was Knicks one week. He was a wild dude. I mean, the stories about Mace with women was crazy. I mean, there was even rumors that he slept with some teammates' wives, which is crazy. Obviously, there's the whole Biggie, I got a story to tell thing, right? He got after it. I mean, he'd leave the game, go out, drink, hang out, go chase girls.
He was Lawrence Taylor for the Knicks. That's what he was. We had our own LT. That's what he was.
We head into the 92-93 season. I think it's a year everybody was excited. They drafted Hubert Davis out of UNC. They bring in Charles Smith. There's a lot of excitement the year before they had taken the Bulls to 7 games. Of course, the Bulls went on to win the championship. And it was just a crazy time for hip-hop for New York.
That was what, Onyx, Wu-Tang, right? Black Moon, Naughty by Name. Oh, yeah, Hip-Hop Parade.
Fat Joe had his first one, Beat Nuts. Oh, Shaq had his first album.
Fat Joe. That was the song of the summer. Flow Joe 92. Bro, and that shit came out. That was the song of the summer. That was the song in the park. Like everybody was playing it in the boombox. You're playing basketball. You got a flow, Joe. That was big. Yep. But back to the Knicks. Hubert Davis, bro, he had the shot. We needed a shooter. Charles Smith, was he 6'10", 6'11"? We were making a move to win the championship. We were beating the Bulls.
You just knew it was going to come down to a matchup between them. New York was like, yo, we're taking this Bulls team on.
Yeah, you got to keep the stain alive. Like, you want to beat this team. There's no time to be friends, and that's why Pat Riley's a champion, bro. You see the difference between the league now and the league then? These guys weren't friends. It was like, yo, we're winning for the next 5 years, and we don't like you. We don't like your team. And you had to come and show and prove if you were trying to bump us out our spot.
This was a time where it sort of had a little bit of a feel like the Bulls were going to be to the Knicks what the Pistons had been to the Bulls. Like, Knicks fans felt like we got to overcome the Bulls to take it. That's who we got to get through. And so you had that feeling. Now, obviously it didn't happen, but you had that feeling. This was a year that the Knicks went into the playoffs with the number 1 seed. And the question was, why are you going to be able to beat the Bulls? But also, the Suns may have been the best team in the league that year, because that was the year Barkley was MVP. People forget. They see Barkley. Kids today see Barkley. They know him from TNT. They think he's funny. They think he's fat joke, da. Yo, people don't understand the athlete and the player that Barkley was. And that year, I mean, he was 26, 12, 5, and 2. 2 blocks, 5 assists, 12 boards, 26 points. They matched up against the Spurs, and he hit the shot to beat them, to send them home. He had 44 points and 24 boards in the Game 7 win over the Sonics. Barkley and that Suns team were just destined to get to the finals. And the question was, Was it going to be the Knicks, the 1 seed, or was it going to be the Bulls? They beat the Pacers in the first round. They beat the Hornets in the second round. And then they match up with the Bulls. They got home court in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks win the first 2 games. This is where Starks got the dunk. Bulls go back at home and win games 3 and 4. MJ drops 54 points in one of those games. And then comes game 5. The Knicks throughout the 90s played in the craziest game 5s, but this was the first of them. Game 5 at the Garden. Knicks down 1.
Charles Smith, bro.
Everybody knows what this is. Down 1, 95-94 with the ball, a little over 20 seconds left. Ewing gets the ball. He drives left, and he sort of stumbles, and he's going down. He's falling, and he just throws it underneath to Charles Smith. And the whole thing with Charles Smith was always like, he was a very intelligent guy, like, but he was considered soft.
Mm-hmm.
And when he joined this Knicks team, they were trying to tough him up. And it was for this moment, I think. But so he passes it to Charles Smith underneath the hoop, goes up for that first layup, blocked by the Bulls, grabs it, goes to pull it up, knocked away by the Bulls, goes up again, blocked by the Bulls, goes up again. And I remember being with Knicks fans that when they would even watch this replay would lose their fucking minds. He was fouled. He was fouled.
That was the most replay, I think, in the history of replays. When that shit happened, bro, that shit was on every channel, on every TV, no matter where you went to a doctor's office, that shit was on. You went to the dentist, you went to wherever you were at, it was playing on the screen for like a week straight. Once he did that, you can't do that against the Bulls. You can't do that against Michael Jordan. And that was it.
The Knicks lost, and the Bulls next game in Chicago, the Bulls closed it out, sent them home 4-2. And I think everybody's just wondering what could have been, especially because the Bulls went on to match up with the Suns and win their 3rd straight title. And that was a crazy series. It had the triple overtime Suns win, and then the series clinching 3 from Paxson that won it.
Oh, that was the Paxson shot. Yeah,
that Paxson shot.
Yep. Yeah, that was game 6 because MJ don't play game 7.
He don't play game 7s.
It was just weird. We were all Jordan fans, but we loved the Knicks. So it was just like, how do you do that? But listen, I can't explain it, but that's what we did.
I know how most of the New Yorkers I knew justified it. They were like, Michael Jordan was born in Brooklyn, so he's one of us.
I didn't justify it. Like, I was just torn. I would watch it, but you know what? You would root for the Knicks, and then but you knew who was in town. You knew Jordan, and it's just, I don't know how I did it, but we all did it. We all love Mike, and we all love the Knicks.
That kind of brings us to the end of this Pat Riley era with Jordan playing, because obviously, after winning this 3rd in a row, he decided to take that time off.